Steve, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so looking forward to having you on our podcast today.
Matthew, it's great to be here.
Amazing. Guys, welcome back to the Coach Launch Podcast, the show for business minded coaches who are serious about growth. Today, we have a guest who is going to challenge the way you think about technology and scaling your business. Steve Anderson is a leading expert in strategic risk and business growth, with more than 35 years of experience helping businesses navigate rapidly changing technology. He is the author of the renowned Bezos Letters, the 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon, a Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and international bestseller that takes Jeff Bezos' shareholder letters and turns them into practical playbook for modern business owners. I'm so excited to be diving into that. Right now, Steve is focused on helping small and mid-sized business owners leverage what is called the Anderson Growth Principle, grouped into the test, build, accelerate, and scale cycles so they can grow faster by overcoming unwanted risk aversion and thinking like Amazon in their own space. Through his book, his growth assessment, and his work as a LinkedIn top voice with hundreds of thousands of followers, Steve is equipping leaders with concrete frameworks to make smarter bets and create bigger breakthroughs. And as a special bonus today, guys, he is going to be offering our listeners a free copy of his incredible book. So look out for that. Steve Anderson, welcome to the Coach Launch Podcast. So good to have you. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, Matthew, let's tackle it.
No worries. Brilliant. So I'm so excited to dive into this concept that you put together based on the Bezos letters, which is, I believe, letters that were written by his CEO and the board of directors. And you've taken these letters and you've created a systematic approach to helping businesses. How incredible. Now, I would just like to take a little bit of a moment before we dive into the Bezos letters and the principles and how you're helping people. I want to just let the audience get to know you a little bit. Take me back a little bit in your journey and tell me how this all came to be. What have you accomplished up to now?
My career has been in the insurance industry in the US. And early on, working in independent insurance agencies, doing pretty much every job. Ended up selling a lot, operations, brought computers in the early 80s when computers were brand new and big refrigerator sized boxes. Really didn't do much. Fell in love with the technology and figuring it out and trying to figure out what can these tools actually do. Fast forward to 1999, I stepped out of the insurance agency operation world and started consulting because I was getting so many questions from other agents about what we were doing and how we were doing it. Could you help us? So I started consulting in 99 and have been doing that since. One of the things I certainly realized, I think a lot of people have realized, is technology continues to develop very rapidly. And I can't
Yeah.
believe even think it's more rapid now than it used to be, but it is. And so I started asking the question, is the biggest risk business face actually not taking enough risk? And because technology, so many businesses were in the past, a lot of businesses were slow, reluctant to jump into get a website. I started researching and looking at companies that once were the top of the game, very successful, and are gone. No, and then companies that have been successful and continue to be successful. And what's the difference between those two? Came across Amazon and the shareholder letters, Matthew, as you indicated, went public here in the US in 1997. And tradition here is the CEO writes an annual letter to stockholders. So those are the shareholder letters. And I started reading a few of the letters and thought, wow, these are really different. Most of the time, those letters are touting the company, how great the CEO is, pitching. Bezos did some of that, but he also talked about how he did it. what were the things that he did or the mindsets that he had? And that's what started really intriguing me. And so I literally sat down and read the letters. At that time was 1997 through 2018, and read every letter in a row. I mean, a book basically is what it was, and realized there were threads throughout the letters. And those threads became the principles that I talked about in the book. And, the book is a whole separate journey that I'll do just a little piece of.
Yeah.
My first, what I call iteration or version of what would become the book, was a PDF lead gen, a giveaway to subscribe to my newsletter and some things that I was doing. And one-page executive summary of each of the letters to date. And my wife,
Yeah.
Karen, who we've been married 50 years now, lovely person, and is in the book business. So I showed it to her saying, I'm really excited about this. This is some really good information. And she looked at it and said, this isn't a lead gen, this is a book. And so that started probably a 2-year journey of turning really unformed ideas into what ended up being published as the Bezos Letters book. And Karen was very instrumental in helping me write the book. So if you like how the book reads, that's hers. If you like the ideas, that's mine.
Amazing. It was a team effort. What a great story. So tell me, with the book that you wrote, it's now a #1 bestseller. It's obviously very popular. Like, I don't know anybody that wouldn't want to tap into the mind of a billionaire like Bezos, right? It's an aspirational story that a lot of us would, we're aspiring to create such great results. Out of the book, I'll dive into a little bit more into this actually. Let's go back a little bit. So you were doing this, you've written the book. Tell me, why is it that people should listen to you? Like, what is it that you're bringing to the table in this whole process?
So the viewpoint of that we have in the book is from a viewpoint of risk. And, if you know anything about the insurance industry, it'd be insurance for your car, your home, your business, whatever. The whole idea of selling an insurance policy is transferring the risk of a loss and a financial hit to an insurance company, and you pay a premium for that transfer. And so I believe, and I call in the book Jeff Bezos the master of risk because of how he used risk strategically to grow. And there are lots of examples of that we may get into. People say entrepreneurs are risk takers. I'm not sure that's actually true, because what happens is they have an idea and they get going and they start getting customers, and then they start protecting what got them there and not exploring what's next. So let's take one or two of the companies that I talked about that once were very successful and are no longer here. And we could pick Kodak or Blockbuster or, all kinds of different companies. What was the thing that I felt became the problem was what Clay Christensen called the innovator's dilemma. So they come up with an idea, they come up with renting VCR tape movies and being able to take them home and play them and then bring them back. That was a great at the time. But then Netflix came along, for Blockbuster at least, right? And all of a sudden, people didn't stop watching movies, but they started watching them streaming online, not going to the store. And Blockbuster actually had the opportunity to buy Netflix and said, we're the big gorilla here. We've got these thousands of stores, and why do we need them? They weren't able to move beyond what they created and realize something had shifted, and they needed to shift too. So they weren't willing to take the risk of shifting.
Yeah.
It really is the core of what I talk about in the book and really my mindset right now. And that's why doing risk strategically is a really important concept if you want to grow as a business. And I think most businesses want to grow, maybe not as big as Amazon, and that's okay. But it's still the mindset of how do we experiment? And again, these are some of the things that Bezos talked a lot about, which is inventing on behalf of the customer and experimenting to know what that next invention is. And if you look at Amazon's history, they have created entirely new businesses by experimenting, failing, trying again, learning from it, and all of a sudden having something brand new that delights customers.
That's a very interesting concept about this, the pushing the risk position that you have. Obviously, risk can also go
Yep.
bad. That's why a lot of people oftentimes have the fear of failure. Like that's a big dilemma. I imagine being a fly on the wall, listening to the conversations that Blockbuster's board were having about whether to buy and what Netflix was thinking and whether Netflix had to sell or how that all came to play. Maybe you have deeper insight onto that. But obviously, everyone's going like, they should have bought Netflix.
Right.
Like that's the obvious conclusion. So, because that didn't last very long. I mean, it wasn't very long till Netflix just exploded through like they just became a dominant force in media. And they're still dominating. Yep. And so if you look at it on the other side of what Netflix has done, what was their risk in this and how they've taken risks to grow the business? I would love to be the fly on the wall to understand that as well.
Do you have any insight? We have time. So now,
yes.
Again, DVD by mail. I still have one back here, if you can see, the red envelopes, etc. They don't do that anymore, right? Because people don't do that with movies anymore. They started creating original content, and their very first show that they created was called House of Cards. And they did something that no one had ever done before. Hollywood, TV studios, nobody, for a serialized show. They released every episode on the same day. What happens normally in the past with TV serialized shows? Episode
1 week.
This Tuesday, episode next Thursday, episode 3 the following. I mean, they released it over time, so people would keep coming back. But what Netflix knew is what their customers did. They tracked, and what they saw is customers wanted to watch shows one after another. So was that a big risk? Yes. But they also had data, and they had tracked what their customers did, and they gave their customers what they wanted, which is, I want to watch 4 shows in a row if I have time, and if I'm going to stay up all night, maybe all of them, right, at one time. And their model wasn't based on advertising. It was based on subscription. Have to keep people coming back so they could show more ads. But that was pretty risky. But they had the data.
And that was the birth of the Netflix binge.
Yes, absolutely. And they had the data to back it up.
And it's obviously paid off huge for them. I was sitting with my daughter last night doing a bit of a Netflix binge, which I don't usually do, but she had me spending time with her. So that's great. That's interesting to think, right? So they've obviously gone through this journey and created their road forward. Now, let's dive into, what do you think? Like, we talk about risk, and we talked about it before, that sometimes risk is a dangerous thing as well. Like, you can take a risk and it doesn't work. Like, you've obviously coming from a big industry like the insurance industry, which is built around risk and managing risk. What are your thoughts about that? Like, you're proposing that people should take action, take these risks. There's obviously got to be a balance to that, and say that, well, if you're taking risk, it needs to be a certain kind of risk, a certain way that you do risk, because not all risk is equal. Could we talk a little bit about that? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
So let me prep a little bit with my first principle in the test cycle, which is called encourage successful failure. Now, that's really interesting because you don't usually hear the terms successful and failure together. But at Amazon, what Bezos said was, we need to experiment to figure out what's next. And by its very nature, an experiment means you're going to fail. Because if you do an experiment and you know it's going to be successful, it's not an experiment. And so the culture was built from the beginning that experimentation is good. Failure's not fatal. The question is, what do you learn from it? And how do you change going forward? And so that was really a core cultural idea that Bezos believed in strongly and incorporated into the culture there at Amazon. And they built tools to help mitigate risk. So one of my favorite tools at Amazon, and this was 2004, when Jeff Bezos sent an email to the senior leadership team, about 16 people, executives at Amazon, and said,
Yeah.
we will no longer allow in our meetings PowerPoint slide-oriented presentations. You will submit as a team a maximum 6-page written memo on whatever decision it is that you are asking this team to make. Move forward on a project, create a new product, whatever. What he said was a couple things. People hide behind PowerPoint. PowerPoint allows people to think surface level, not deeply, about what they want. When you have to write it out, that by its very nature forces you to think more deeply and more clearly about, here are the points, here's what we know, here's what we want, here's what we don't know. And people, it took a little while to kind of work out some of the bugs, but it's a really interesting process. And that memo, and Bezos talks a lot about it in his letters, that memo is not sent out before the meeting. It's handed out at the meeting. And the first 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes of the meeting is spent everybody reading the memo. Because what Bezos said was, executives are busy. They say they'll read it beforehand. They don't. So we're just going to carve out time in the meeting and literally we'll all be on the same page. And then we open it up for discussion. So think about one, forcing people or giving people a mechanism to really think deeply about the problem, the product. And those memos always started with a future press release, a mock-up of the press release that was going to be sent out the day the product, platform, or service was released to the public. What's the advantage? Why will the customer like it?
They've done a pre-marketing practice on the thing that they're trying to develop or create. Wow.
And again, as I said, it forces people to think deeply, not at surface levels.
I've seen so many times where we all know that time is so limited, right? And if you're running a fast-paced business like that and you send somebody a letter, chances are they're going to look at the headline and maybe a few words in that, and then boom, the next thing happens, right? So to just illustrate the power of this, it's insane because you've got an entire team in a place reading and understanding the mechanism of what they're doing. So everyone's on the same page at the same time. Like that is incredibly powerful.
And very few
that
companies,
is mind-blowing. And
very few companies do it. And people are writing notes in the margin, so questions or explain this, as that discussion becomes so much richer and deeper, and they get to the core of the problems or the issues or how's this going to work. And they approve whatever their question, and it doesn't work out the way they think. What they have something to go back to look at and say, what didn't we understand that we should have? What did we get wrong? And how can we learn from that and change it in the future? So that tool becomes the risk mitigation factor. That's to me fascinating.
It is. huge. It's an amazing tool. And I think for anyone listening to this, like having your team on the same page as you at the same time so that you don't have to, number one, backwards and forwards emails and questions and after the meeting or after the fact, having everything dialed in at the right time and having everyone moving in the same direction and decisions getting made quicker. The trajectory is so much faster, right? Through those decision-making things that happen, especially if you're developing or taking risk or planning or strategizing a new move.
Yep.
Right?
One other
Amazing.
comment on this is that the culture is important here. I believe employees aren't afraid of failure, but they are afraid of the consequences of failure. Meaning, I'm not going to do that because it could, impact my career. I could get fired. I could get demoted. I could get, right. And if you haven't built a culture of ability to fail and not do those things, that becomes a really interesting balancing act, because I want to emphasize that Amazon absolutely is intolerant of incompetence. So if you keep failing,
I'm trying to understand
so,
that.
you know, successful failure, being tolerant as a business owner of employees experimenting and it not working out, because most likely it won't. And there's a line there somewhere where if you're just incompetent and you keep failing, that's not good either. So, that's that interesting tension that happens between the culture and performance. And so, I mean, Jeff Bezos said in the very first 97 letter, Amazon will be a hard place to work because we're building something important, something we can tell our grandchildren about. And so, over the years, lots of kind of press around the culture, the work culture, the idea that Amazon's a tough place to work. And Bezos said, A-list people want to work with A-list people, not B-list. So
That's an important aspect of it, right? You mentioned a competency, because if you're not hiring the right people, then you're risking, that's even a risk,
right.
right? And then you're talking about creating the culture to allow for that risk to be taken, in that doing it once, learning from it and growing is where we want to go, versus doing the same thing over and
Right.
over, or having the same thing failing all the time. And you're like, well, hold on a
Yeah.
minute. There's no growth out of this. There's a problem, right? Is it competency, or is it culture, or is it the system?
Or,
Maybe we should change
frankly, just
direction. And
being,
that's the big
wrong person at the wrong place. I mean, that happens. But yes.
I would like to dive into something that we were talking about, and I think this is a good segue into technology and AI, because you're moving into the direction of AI and helping people with risk. Talk to me about this journey, and how does the Bezos letters fit into this new direction? You've been consulting for many, many years, helping people with technology. Technology is growing so rapidly now, and I feel a lot of people, me personally, a lot of overwhelm due to all the new tools, all the new tech, all the new things that are coming out, and you just can't keep up. So how is this fitting into what you're doing in your model? Because you're now helping and consulting people with technology and helping small to medium businesses implement better technologies. Talk to me a little bit about all of this.
I think that the core idea here, let me just say this first, is one of the things Bezos said that keeps companies growing. One of four factors, the one I want to highlight, is eager adoption of external trends. And he wrote about that in the 2016 letter. And in that letter, he actually identified machine learning as one of those trends. A little technical, but machine learning was an early precursor, part of the artificial intelligence development timeline. The term artificial intelligence was first used in 1955. So very smart
Wow.
people have been working on this for 70 years. And 3 years ago, in November, all of a sudden, OpenAI announced ChatGPT, and there were a couple of iterations before that, but didn't garner much attention. But all of a sudden, this ChatGPT came out, and people were blown away. That's a lot of what happens with technology. Now people have had 3 years to kind of play with it, and myself included. I was an early adopter, and as I describe it, have gone pretty deep down the rabbit hole. Um, it's an amazing tool. Certainly, there's things to pay attention to. I think right now, what's happening is people are focusing on AI as a tool, meaning help me write an email, help me summarize this document, help me make my menu for this week. I mean, all of those things are possible. That's a really surface level use of this tool. The
Yeah.
real advantage to businesses is when they start thinking of the generative AI tools as strategic thought partners. They are actually really pretty good as long as you give it the information it needs to help business owners understand themselves better and their business better. I've created a process to gather that information and really create a strategic thought partner, a business coach that you can go to as a business owner, ask questions about clients and customers, ask questions about marketing, ask questions about finances. It probably knows you and your business better than you do at this point. And I think that's going to be the real power of how this tool is going to impact individual businesses.
Okay, so just so I'm clear and I understand this, you're building a framework to help small business owners be able to utilize AI, artificial intelligence, like ChatGPT, as a business advocate. Is that correct?
That is correct.
To help make strategic decisions.
Well, and let me add kind of one aspect to that. It helps you think by asking you questions. It helps you think through the decisions that you're making. So it will give you some guidelines and give you some questions. And have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So it becomes that strategic partner for you to help you dive deeper into what it is, the idea or the question you have, or how should I think about this? And that's that strategic thought partner aspect.
Okay, so what you're developing is not so much about making the decisions, it's more about helping you make better decisions. Interesting. And so that's a very powerful framing. Talk to me about how the Bezos letters or your Bezos process fits into this technology.
Well, the framework I built because of the book, we mentioned it briefly, but there are 14 principles that are grouped into 4 cycles: test, build, accelerate, and scale. I believe every business is going through those 4 cycles repeatedly. So, test, obviously, experimentation. What's the new thing? Maybe you have something in your business that you created 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago. That's your cash cow. That is the thing. But that's not necessarily going to be your cash cow forever because things change. So what's next? What's the next thing you need to do? An example from Amazon is Amazon's known for online retail, the everything store. And they're known for cloud computing and logistics expertise. So small businesses can access Amazon's warehouse and logistics services and sell their own products. But here's what Bezos said.
It's crazy.
If it's better for the customer, it will ultimately be better for Amazon. Because if a third-party seller has a product that we don't have in stock, that's better for the customer. If they have a price that's lower than we have, that's better for the customer. And so that's that customer obsession and how Bezos thinks about those types of business decisions that seem totally counterintuitive and crazy actually turned into multi-billion dollar revenue generation machines.
That's such a good point. And so we take a step back. I like the component of what's next, because what business owner doesn't want to know what's next, especially for them? What's the next step? What is the next direction? What is the most logical thing that we can do as business owners right now that can move us into a positive direction? And right now, we all understand that those that adapt and adopt AI are the ones that are going to have the most leverage. And so coming back to the point of how you're using AI to help with this consultancy type process, where we can use AI to make intelligent, faster decisions, where it helps us to understand and be creative in the process. I like that because it doesn't give AI the control. We're working together as a team with our team, and it's empowering the team to kind of understand markets, to understand a lot of data quickly, and to make decisions as to what's next. I think for us as business owners, if we don't know what's next, we're already failing.
Right. And it may take
to
fail ultimately, but if you start down that process, what Bezos calls the day two company, meaning they're dead, they just don't know it yet.
Yeah. And that's the reality of it, because two things come into my mind, right? It's complacency and the fear of taking those risks. Having a large data set to draw from that makes it easy to understand. You could put in a whole lot of data, and then having technology help you to understand those metrics or mechanisms, working with you to move in a more positive direction. How insane. That is so cool.
And
I love it.
Again, all of this is infused with the 14 growth principles. So, it's an easier way to operationalize the principles and understand what principles could impact whatever decision or thought or step you're trying to take. Give you deeper insight into your own business.
That's incredible. So you're putting Bezos's mind into AI and helping to formulate business decisions. Who doesn't want to have the mind of Bezos in their business,
and,
right?
it's unlikely you're going to have him as a business coach, but this may be the next best thing.
Wow. Love it. So yeah, a couple of things come to mind as we're talking about this, right? And we talked about risk. How would this alleviate or minimize or work around risk as a business owner, right? I want to make decisions. You've got this amazing technology working to help make business decisions, but how do I mitigate risk? How is that working for me? Because that's a big thing that people come, because we're always going to come to the whole process of fear of failure. Like, it's a huge thing in our human psychology, right? Like, are we making the right decisions? Is this going to fail? And that holds so many people back. How would this tool help with that?
Simple questions like, what questions should I be asking? What don't I understand about the process so far? And again, because you've added information about your business to it, you've added information about who you are and how your decision-making process, it can start understanding and seeing. One of the great things about the current tools, and I think the best thing, they can make connections we could never see as people reading data, right? They can look at all your customer support calls and identify a couple things. For example, one, who is most likely to leave? So if you have a subscription model, who's going to churn? That's the biggest issue with subscriptions, right? Is churn. The potential for churning 60 to 90 days ahead, now you have a head start in, let me reach out to these people. What can I do? You're not going to save them all, but you save 50% of them. That's a huge revenue boost. So those kinds of connections are what the tools are really good at. And then helping you make some of those connections with vast amounts of data. Again, I consider all of that strategic use, not, as I keep saying, write me an email.
That's right. And so here's the thing, and I think there's another big gap that we probably need to talk about, is that you got people wanting to use technology. And now it's easy to go and plug into a tool and say, help me write emails, fix up my email list, because it's become an easy process that people can dive into. Like the pain, struggling with email, I need an email written.
Right.
And so it's become a go-to for that, writing content, writing scripts. But now we're finding a lot of stuff is just being replicated and copied. But if I was going to get into this AI world and use AI strategically for my business, the first thing that comes to, well, there's a lot of things, but overwhelm, tech overwhelm. I've got to drive my team to, number one, adopt this and know how to use this. Like, talk to me about a transition from a business going 100 miles an hour as a locomotive in direction, and they've got all this stuff going. They understand they want to bring tech or help have AI integrated into their business models, but they're struggling. Number one, they've got to skill up their team. Number two, they've got their team mindset into this, because there's a whole team shift that has to happen. And a lot of people are afraid of losing their jobs because of all of this. So if I was to adopt, say, a technology that's this amazing technology to help me make better strategic decisions, how would you handle that flow and that process to getting people to that place?
A couple things come to mind. Let's talk about employees first, because you're right. There's a big fear out there of, if AI can do it, then what do I need? And I am not a believer in that. I believe strongly that AI enhances human capability, not replaces it. Meaning that email. I mean, we can go to that simple example. When the AI understands your voice, how you write, because it's looked at examples of things that you've written in the past, and it can streamline the process of writing. You, as a person, still need to review it. I tell people all the time, please do not copy and paste without reviewing. And it's easy to get lazy. And if you do that and get lazy, you're going to run into people not trusting, oh, this AI wrote it and it's not real, and all of those kinds of things. But I always tell business owners, have your staff identify the 5 things they do every week that they do the same every week. So what are the things? And then look at, can an AI tool help streamline that process? Not replace it, but streamline it, make it save me time so that I can do what I do best, which is build relationships with customers. And not too many staff in many businesses are busy work, not productive work, not relational work. Having that space to go, hey, this process, we've been doing this same way for 5 years, but you know what? I don't think we need to do it that way anymore. That takes space and some time to start identifying that. I think those are aspects on staff. For the business owner, what if your staff could ask the AI questions that it's been trained and built to respond as you would respond? Because often, if not most of the time, the actual business owner is the bottleneck, because they have to approve everything. They have to look at everything. They have to have their fingers and, touch. And that may not change, but if staff could get part way by being able to ask this virtual you questions and get answers that, again, are vetted, and it's trained, and you become, better at understanding it and believing it. Those are ways that AI can augment, not replace.
Oh, so that's a couple of things there we can dive into. Teams are still going to be struggling to adapt and evolve to AI for a while, I still believe, because there's the fear of losing jobs and all that kind of stuff. However, a lot of trends where there's a lot of corporations and there's a big $1 million industry teaching teams to adapt AI, which is going to be huge, because as you said, AI should be enhancing humans, not replacing humans. And I think a lot of businesses are realizing the power of that. If they can upskill their teams to use AI. So, but going through your process, right? As a business owner, one of the biggest things is that if you've got a large team and they're drawing information from it, the big thing is trust, right? Like, how do I know that that information is going to be valid and it's going to be the right decisions, the right direction, all that kind of stuff? What are the stopgaps at making those decisions? Like, if you've got a small team, it's not too hard. You're going to check that stuff. But if you've got a large team and you're running, like, say, a medium-sized business, you're doing 5 to 10 million a year, how do you break down the trust barrier for that or make it more trusting?
Well, a couple things. One is, the tools allow you to monitor and see what's the questions being asked and what the answers being given are. The business owner's responsibility, somebody's responsibility to review, really audit logs, if you don't want a little technical term for it, but how is it responding? And is it responding correctly? Do we need to tweak it? Do we need to add more information? Those are ongoing maintenance steps that are really important for these tools. One, to continue to improve, and nobody's going to be able to know all the questions that are going to be asked. So you need somebody to look at it, review it, tweak, add more information, take away, change. That's an ongoing maintenance that absolutely is part of the process. It's not really a tool, but a process for self-verification. One of the ways I do that is I ask the model, verify that this is true and accurate. So people hear about hallucinations, right? In AI, it just makes up stuff. When you ask it to verify what it created is true and accurate, it actually will. It'll go back and look at all the stuff and it'll say, no, I made this up. I need to be clear that this actually is a potential situation, not an actual quote, and then update based on that. So there are ways to check and balances in the responses, but it is an ongoing iterative process.
Amazing. So there's multiple layers there that we're moving through. So it's empowering staff to be more tech savvy and to take on board the AI and teaching them. But there's a big mindset shift that's happening. Having you as the business owner, maybe a board of directors, having their own infrastructure put into AI so that the teams can get quick information or quick feedback loops happening on big key decisions, which I love is what we were talking about earlier, is having a next level consultant helping the businesses making better decisions in their process. So there's so many multiple layers
Correct.
into this. Talk to me about this upper layer that we were talking about earlier, and that's empowering businesses to make strategic next step decisions. I think that for me is one of the most interesting constructs or concepts in this whole discussion that we're having, because I want to know that I, as a business owner, and I think many business owners do, want to know what's next. How can we protect our businesses, keep the energy going, and go in directions that are going to be fruitful and not have the business falling apart? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, one way to do that is, and again, back to large data sets or large amounts of information, all of your customer interactions, telephone conversations, when customers are calling with problems or, I need help with this, mining that for what product could we create based on this set of customer feedback that they would be more willing to purchase. Maybe it's an upgrade. Maybe it's something entirely new that you hadn't thought about that your customers are actually asking for. And you have the data if you're tracking any of that stuff. It's just really hard for humans to make those connections. It's not hard for the AI models to make those connections. That's what they really are good at. And so now it's, hey, talk to me about all the problems our customers are having. What do you think could be an improvement we should make? Or is there a whole new product here that we should look at that's within our realm of expertise? I don't know how I'd phrase that. Part of what I hope people are hearing, it's a conversation you're having. It's not a prompt. It's not a Google search. It's hey, tell me more about this. Or it's a back and forth, it's an iterative process where you're working with the tool and better understanding or using the tool to help you better understand your own business more so than you know right now. And I think, again, we're just starting to scratch the surface of that capability. And I do believe that's the next frontier in, moving away from tool. And some tools are really helpful. Don't get me wrong, but the real value is that conversation, that iteration, that business coach type idea.
So it's like having somebody helping you through the conversation and helping you make better decisions. So creating that is something that you're helping people with, right?
Right.
This is a model that you're creating. For every business, I suppose it's a little bit different. And so how would you go through that process with people if you're helping business owners create these infrastructures to help make smarter decisions? Talk to me about that.
Well, there are really two primary steps of information gathering. The first is for the business owner or the decision maker, whoever that might be, you know, who are you? How do you make decisions? Where do you enjoy what you're doing? Where do you not enjoy what you're doing? And it's a series of questions that really, helps you explain better kind of who you are, how you make decisions, and where you think your expertise lies. Other is really a business blueprint. What is your business? How long have you been there? What are your products? What are your offers? What's your customer profile? And you may not really know that. A lot of businesses don't really understand their customer profile. And so we may help build that out. And then we'll add things like your brand identity, your brand voice. Who are you? How do you like to present the business to your customers? And all of those are pieces of information that are fed into the knowledge base of the AI tool and help inform it the information it needs to know how to respond. And then some very complicated that you don't need to know anything about in terms of deep research along different topics that again help the tool have the information it needs to better help you understand your business better and where the next opportunity might be.
Cool. Love it. And so the outcome of this would be an AI technology that is helping business owners and boards to make better critical decisions about moving in certain directions. It will respond with asking the hard questions, and this way it comes into managing and understanding the risk of every decision that's being made, right?
And it'll push back. I mean, it'll challenge, why are you thinking this way? Or what? I mean, so it's not just trying to make you happy. It's trying to help you get to the best decision possible, for moving forward on whatever that particular decision is.
Like that. It's not there to make you happy, it's there to help you make real decisions. And that's important, right? As business owners, we have a lot of people around us trying to make us happy and not giving us actual real like pushback. And pushback is necessary to have thought process to get you in that right direction. I love the idea of this. I love this whole concept of tapping into AI and using large data sets to make quick decisions. If you put a team on it, it could take months, maybe even years to sort through all that data. And now today we have this ability to make it happen so quick. It's just a matter of putting that together the right way. And that's what your team and your company is helping with, right? So it's really, really exciting stuff. So as we move into the end of this, Steve, this has been an amazing conversation. It's gone so fast. It always goes fast when I'm having fun. And I enjoy this topic so much because I think it's definitely the future. Us as business owners need to look at how we can adopt and adapt into AI fast because it's coming whether we like it or not. Whether we're afraid of it or not, we got to learn to use these tools. So I appreciate you being here with us today. I love this conversation. Really exciting. How can people get hold of you? What have you got next for us? Can you share?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And again, Matthew, thank you for having me on. I obviously enjoy talking about all this stuff. I think it's exciting, and I do think the potential is, I won't say unlimited, but there's a lot of potential here. So the book website is thebezosletters.com. Um, LinkedIn is my primary platform. If you search for me there, it's Steve Anderson Bezos or Steve Anderson Insurance. You should find me. Connect with me. Let me know you listened in, and I'll be glad to connect with you there. I also have a newsletter on LinkedIn, and I want to offer your listeners, Matthew, just to re-emphasize, in the show notes will be a link where you can download a digital copy of the book, either a Kindle or a PDF. Obviously, I think it's good. I would encourage you to read it, especially if any of these, because we literally only got, I think there's, maybe 12 other principles we didn't even talk about, all that have significant impact on your business. And I think you'll find it a good read. So I encourage you to download it and let's skim it. I would say that. So
I love it. I'm excited to read that, and I'm definitely going to be jumping into that. Just so our listeners understand, guys, that's incredible value. This is a #1 best-selling book Steve is giving us today for free. Like, that is huge value. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate that. I'm going to dive into it for sure, and I want to learn more about this whole concept because I'm super interested in both understanding the frameworks of Bezos and how this new world of technology is going to be able to help develop and create new business opportunities. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a privilege. I'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.